project is so simple and elegant. This is the jar I got the lid from for the racetrack lantern. I removed the stickers and then used my E6000 glue to attach the pieces. You do not want to use hot glue on glass. It will not hold up over time and will peel right off. I did add hot glue to the center for a quick hold, but let the E6000 dry for a little bit, and then painted just the bottom jar black. I was debating what I wanted to do with the top, and since this is a Christmas project, I thought, why not add some faux snow? So I got out my Mod Podge. Any finish will work here. I used gloss and spread it around the jar. You could do this a few different ways. I chose to do sections and then sprinkle the snow on top. You could also coat the whole thing with your Mod Podge and then roll it in the snow. That way would be easier if I hadn't already painted the bottom piece. Next, I took my antique gold rub and buff and a tiny little detail paintbrush to add a pop of gold in between all the lines in the glass jar. I love how subtle it is, and you can see less or more of that gold depending on how the light is hitting the jar. It is so pretty. Then I took my finger to rub it along the edge of the jar. And for the last little detail on this piece, I added gold metallic ribbon that matches the rub and buff. You could certainly embellish this further, add a bow if you like. I'm not a bow girl, and I don't think everything requires an abundance of accessories, but I love how minimal and elegant this one turned out. Project, I am using one of the medium-sized rings. I forgot to mention in the first project I used the largest size for that one, but I'm taking some jute twine. This is the Dollar Tree twine, so it's the really thin stuff. You could use the thicker twine if you wanted to. I tested that one, didn't really like the look of it. It was a little bit too thick for this project, but I just hot glued the end down around itself around the ring, and then I'm going to wrap it around the center several times. Once I'm happy with the amount of twine I have, I just hot glued it down, cut off the end, and then I'm taking a lighter to singe off all of those little frayed bits on the jute twine. If you're not comfortable with this step, do not do it. It is not necessary. If you like that more rustic look, I would leave it just how it is. Next, I cut out the word winter with my Cricut, and I'm going to place them onto these 18mm beads. And I did not think when doing this step, you guys, I put them on the wrong way. The holes for the beads should have been sideways instead of up and down.
Oh my god, I'm so dumb.
But I decided to string them along my jute cord before fixing them, and I just added a little dab of hot glue to the end of my jute twine before stringing it through my beads. It makes it a lot easier that way because they are kind of rough through the center and sometimes your string can get stuck. So once I had all of my beads strung up on the jute twine, then I fixed my stickers and made them face the correct direction, and then I added a little dab of hot glue in between each bead as well so that they would stay in place and not move around. Then I just hot glued my jute twine with my winter beads down in place, and then I'm taking some various picks that I just have lying around and I am weaving them through the jute twine until I am happy with the look. And that was it for this one. Super simple and so beautiful and modern. I just love it. Alright, for this project, I've had these sets of shutters lying around forever. I actually picked them up from a house down the street from me where they were trying to sell, and they had put a large trash pile of free stuff out on the curb, and I still have more to use. But I gave them a really good cleaning since they are super dirty with my Dixie Belle Pristine Clean formula. I did not sand them down or do anything else because I want to add milk paint. Milk paint is supposed to work well on a slick surface, and these shutters have a satin finish. I'm using the color Driftwood, which is a beautiful chocolate brown. When mixing up milk paint, you want to use a 1-to-1 ratio of powder to water and stir it up really well for 2 minutes, allowing the powder to fully absorb. I'm still trying to figure out the correct ratio and consistency for my liking, and I think I made the paint too thin this time. I gave the shutters 3 coats of the milk paint and used my heat gun to help dry and get that chippy look. I'm not sure why, but this piece really did not chip much, which was surprising because it was a slick surface, but I think that was because the paint was just too thin. Now, for the detail on the shutters, I found these deer silhouettes at Hobby Lobby. I got them 40% off, so they were around $3, which I thought was a great deal. I'm going to decoupage the deer, but first I need to paint it white. Most of the time when you're decoupaging a napkin, you want to start with a white or a light base underneath. That way the napkin will look more vibrant and true to color. I found these napkins, I'm pretty sure, at Hobby Lobby last holiday. They're a simple pattern that I thought would look really elegant on these shutters. A lot of napkins I buy for decoupaging are 2-ply, but sometimes they're 3-ply. This one is a 3-ply, so you want to make sure you pull off both background layers before adding to your project. I tend to need to wet my fingers and pinch the napkin to get that last layer to separate. Before I add the napkin to my project, I like to tear the edges, and I do this for a few reasons. One, a lot of times there's a little raised border around the outside of the napkin, and I don't want that on my final project. But most importantly, when you need to line up more than one napkin, or if you will see the edge of the napkin on your project, this makes it blend right into the project and you can't even tell where it ends. So I take a detail paintbrush, dipped in water, run it across that napkin where I want it to rip, and then tear it off. To attach the napkin, I'm using my DIY liquid patina. This is my favorite decoupage medium to work with, but it does dry quickly, so you want to add a generous amount to the project. Now, typically when I decoupage, I like to use my fingers to spread the napkin down and smooth it out. However, my good friend Brandy over at the DIY Struggle, she likes to use a sponge. I've tried this once before and didn't really care for it, but I wanted to give it another try. I still don't love this method and prefer to use my fingers. Either way, you're going to get small wrinkles, but I wanted to share an alternative with you in case maybe you're a little too rough with your finger. You want to let the glue dry before getting the excess napkin off the edges. I have not tried this burn method that's been floating around a bit and thought it would be perfect to try since these antlers are really intricate. So first I cut around the deer's shape so that there wasn't an excessive amount of napkin to burn. So this method works, yes, but there's a few things I don't care for. Since this piece is white, you could see the char marks all around the edge and parts of the napkin had looked a little yellow. It also did not burn as clean as I would have thought, and I still had to go back in with my traditional sandpaper method to clean it up. I would say I prefer the sandpaper method over the burn method, but let me know if you've tried burning and what you think about it. Okay, so this wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't screw something up, right? Initially, I was planning to put one deer in the middle of the two shutter pieces, but the more I thought about it, the deer was too small for that, so I separated the shutters and I bought a second deer head to decoupage. But I wanted them to face opposite directions, and these deer have a wood piece and hanger on the back, so I used my scraper and hammer to get that off. It was glued on pretty well, but there was also some pin nails in the wood I had to pull out. Then I used an 80 grit sandpaper to smooth out the surface before painting and decoupaging the second deer. That's where I screwed up. I forgot which paint I used and ended up using a different one. So now the deer are two different shades of white, which was pretty obvious to me. Even my husband, who typically wouldn't notice something like that, could tell that they were different. So what did I do? I took the back off that first deer, repainted, redecoupaged them both so that they would be the same color. But I'm really glad that I did, even though it was more work. Once I had both deer in the same color, I gave them a clear top coat. Now I need to attach the deer onto the shutters. I wanted them to sit off the surface a little bit, so I grabbed some scrap popsicle stick pieces and glued those down. Then I added the sawtooth hanger back on. I wanted 2 screws in the shutter so the deer sits correctly, and to get the screws in the correct spot, I stuck them under the sawtooth hanger where they would sit, added a piece of tape over top to hold them in place, and then I pushed the point of the screw into the shutter so I know where to drill. Then you want to make sure to pre-drill a hole before adding the screw or you will split the shutter wood. I have done that. But now the deer are not permanently attached and you could swap them out for something else all year long. That's it for this one. You could embellish the shutter further. I was going to, but decided to keep it minimal, and I love how elegant they look. But I'm using 27 blocks for this first part and gluing groups of 3 blocks together. So you'll end up with 9 groups of 3 blocks each. Next, I'm gluing the 3 block sets together to form a square, and I'm alternating the direction of each block set. Now, you really aren't going to see this pattern in the end, unfortunately, but I still like how it looks. So one set will be vertical, the next horizontal, and then vertical, and for the next row you do the opposite. So it's vertical, horizontal, vertical. That's the first part of this project. Next, I'm making another square, but it will look a little different. This time you need 8 blocks, and each side of the square will have 2 blocks. Then I'm making one more square, the same as the last one, except each side has 1 block, and we're making this one 2 rows tall. Now I'm putting the pieces together. This is going to be the base for what we're making, but the pattern square is the bottom since it's the largest. Then the large single block square goes on top, and the 2-row small square goes in the center of that. And that's it for the block portion. So let's move on to the rest of this project. I saw this beautiful berry tree on the Kirkland's website for originally $200, and I knew I could recreate that much cheaper. So far, we are $1.25 in with the Jenga blocks, and the berries are the most expensive part. I got mine from Walmart, and they were $4.48 for each pick. I know that can get pricey. I spent $50 here, but the quality of these berries is so good. And I picked up 11 picks, but I actually think the tree could have used one more. So if you recreate this, pick up 12. Now, Hobby Lobby also has some great berry picks, but theirs are even more expensive, and to be honest, they look very similar to the Walmart ones. Okay, now to build the tree, I need a branch, and I had one laying around, but you could also get one for free from outside. And I learned my lesson from last week's duping through the holidays video and used floral foam to secure my branch in place. I also go back later and fill the sides plus cover the top of the foam with hot glue because the branch was wobbling around. My branch is about 31 inches tall, and my tree ends up being about 46 inches tall in total, which is a little bit shorter than the Kirkland's version at 51 inches. Now I'm moving into the living room because this thing is so tall, and of course, as soon as I get my lighting and everything set up, Mr. Sarge thinks the spotlight is all for him. He is so handsome. Anyways, moving on, to attach the berry picks to the branch, I'm using floral tape. If you've never used floral tape before, it's soft to the touch, not sticky at all, but you stretch it and wrap it onto itself and then it sticks together. I found it easier to rip a long piece of the floral tape and wrap it up rather than leaving it on the roll, and this floral tape is also from the Dollar Tree. I also started out attaching the picks too close together, and looking at the Kirkland's version, it is more sporadic, which I liked. So that's the nice thing about using floral tape. It's easy to take it off and move things around as needed. When adding each new branch, I bent the bottom of the pick so it would stick out from the tree as far as I wanted it. At the top of the tree, most of the pick stem was wrapped up in that floral tape, and as I went down the tree, less and less of the stem was attached, so the branches looked like they were longer at the bottom compared to the top. Here you can see where I had to fill in the base with glue. The branch was top heavy with all the picks on it and was getting loose from the foam, but the glue helped hold it from going anywhere. Once I had all the picks on the tree, I needed to paint the floral tape since it's green. You can buy brown floral tape, but I already had the green on hand. I mixed up a few brown colors I have to try and get it as close as I could to the pick stems. It's a little bit off, but that's okay. I also went in with a darker brown and a chippy brush to add details to the trunk while the paint was still wet. That's it for this guy. As a reminder, the Kirkland's version cost $200, and I didn't realize until editing this that it's pre-lit as well. I did not add lights to mine, but you easily could wrap some fairy lights around it. So mine cost $52 without the lights, and if you added 3 sets of fairy lights from the Dollar Tree, you're looking at about $56.
I love this tree so much.
Box that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I just popped the back right off. I took some scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby. It's like a black shiplap, and I just cut this down to size, and I also painted around the edges of the backing from that shadow box, just in case anything were to peek through. I did not use my Cricut for this project, but I still wanted to show it as inspiration on how you can still get that look. And then I just hot glued this little scrapbook piece into place. Next, I took these gold transfer letters that I got from the Dollar Tree and I cut out Winter Wonderland and added those on. Now I'm taking these little Christmas trees. They're for the like Christmas villages from the Dollar Tree, and I cut down the backs of them just a little bit so they would lay flat against my sign, and I just hot glued those down in place. The last thing I did was add in this iridescent faux snow, and then I just pop the backing back on, and this is it. Super easy, super simple. I love the way this turned out. And I'm sorry if you can hear my son in the background. He is waiting so impatiently for me to be done with the laptop.
For this project, I'm making some decorative present boxes. I wanted 3 in different shapes and sizes, so I found 2 empty boxes from recent purchases I had, and then I couldn't find a small box in the shape I wanted. So I decided to make one using these giant Jenga blocks I got at Five Below over the summer. I glued 4 blocks together to create a square, and then made the present 3 rows high. Next, to cover all of my boxes, I picked up a few of these fluffy white car towels from the Dollar Tree. Now, the first box I did, I was trying to make it actually look like a present with the folded sides, but with how big this box was, that was pretty difficult. Since the towel didn't cover the box all the way, I was trying to piece it together and still have it look decent. On the areas where I need to attach 2 pieces of the car towel, I added a bead of glue to one edge and then used my spatula to blend them together as best as I could. But this part is the back, so you're not going to see it. You can see here where I was trying to piece things together to make it look like an actual wrapped present, but it's a little bit messy. So for the other 2 boxes, I cut pieces of the towel out that would cover each of the sides of the present and then glued them together at the corner seams. That was so much easier. Now, to decorate the boxes, I wanted them to look like a set but not be identical. And I found this interesting organic looking ribbon at Dollar Tree a while ago. I love the neutral color, but it was too wide for the small box. So I cut it in half and then glued it down. Then I filled one of my snowflake IOD molds with hot glue. This is a great little hack, and these molds have so much beautiful detail to them. This clip is not the snowflake I end up using. My son again wanted to help and he made a bigger one, and I used his snowflake on the present box. But you could also use the small wood snowflakes or table scatter that Dollar Tree puts out if you don't have a mold like this to get a similar look. Once the glue dried, I painted it with this white pearl acrylic paint and added glitter paint on top for some sparkle. Just look at that detail, it is so stunning. Before I added this on top of the present, you could see that hole through the fabric, so I took a few Dollar Tree Jenga blocks and added them inside, and then glued the snowflake down on top. And for a little pop of color, I added one of these Dollar Tree cardinals on top. I don't know if I like this detail though. You guys have to let me know what you think in the comments. Should I have left it off? For the next box, I added this velvet ribbon, but then to tie it into that smaller box, I added that same Dollar Tree ribbon on top. I love that layered look. Then I added a bunch of pine pick pieces and pine cones to the center. It turned out so pretty. This one is my favorite. In the third present, I used the velvet ribbon by itself and added a Walmart floral pick that has red berries to tie in that red bird. I think these presents turned out so beautiful to set out as a vignette for the holidays.
This is a fence post that was in the 70% off section of Home Depot. I'm assuming because it has like gouges taken out of the wood. So I got it 70% off, and we are going to cut this guy down into houses. I'm sorry my shoulder is completely in the way here, but I'm just measuring how tall I want my houses to be from the base to the peak of the roof. And I ended up getting this $20 fence post for only $2 from that 70% off section at Home Depot. Such a great deal. To cut them down, I'm using the big monster chop saw. And after I have my 6 blocks, I need to change the angle of my saw blade to cut the roofs. I did a few of them at 45 degrees and a few at 30 degrees. Since these wood blocks are pretty small, I didn't want to hold them, so instead I grabbed a clamp to hold the block against the saw fence, and then I can safely cut the angles for the roof. This saw creates so much dust. I wish I had a dust collector, but R2-D2 will have to work for now to clean up. Next, we need to sand everything down, and since this fence post was so rough, I used my orbital sander with an 80 grit paper. After the houses are pretty smooth, I'm going to paint them. 2 I painted with my favorite fawn color right now, watered down. 2 I watered down a white for a whitewash, and then 2 are solid black. Now I'm going to add holes into the roof for my chimney using my 7/8 inch spade bit. I needed the hole to be at an angle, and I found the easiest way to do this is to go in straight to start and then gently raise your arm while you're still drilling to create the angle for the chimney so it's straight up and down. Then using this 3/4 of an inch copper pipe I had left over from the last candlestick holder I made, I will link that video if you haven't seen it. I'm going to take my pipe cutter and cut this down for the chimneys. All that's left to do is add the candles. So here's the Pinterest version and mine. I love how minimal and modern these look.
This project is pretty easy. I found this belt at the Goodwill recently and knew right away I wanted to make it over for Christmas. I love the spindle handle on top and the rest was easy to change. I thought I'd be able to remove that bird transfer that was on it. I tried acetone, I tried goof off, paint thinner, I tried a scraper, but nothing was working. So I ended up just painting over it. I taped off that handle and gave the belt 3 coats of white paint. After the paint was dry, I wanted to bring out some of that beautiful scroll detail and sand it over the paint a little bit. I don't love a lot of distressing, so I only took a little bit of paint off around the edges, but you could certainly distress something like this as much as you like for your style. Then I took it out into the garage to spray it with a sealer, and oh, you guys, I do not like this polyurethane spray sealer. It always ends up having a yellow tint to it. I much prefer polyacrylic, but that stuff is just so much harder to find in a spray paint in my area. But anyways, I took it back inside to paint the inside of the belt black, so the distressed detail would really show up better, and I realized that handle just screwed right off, which would have made painting the belt so much easier. Oh well. Next I wanted to add a transfer, and yes, I know I just covered one up, but I wanted it to look more festive for the holidays. And I picked up this IOD Christmas transfer pack recently. There are so many beautiful transfers in here. This thing is going to last a long time and make so many projects. I cut out one of the small holly pieces to use on the bell. I had also cut out some of the pitberry pieces, but didn't end up using those. I wanted to keep it on the simple side, but again, do whatever works for your style. When adding transfers or stencils or anything really onto a round surface, roll up some towels or fabric to place on either side of the object. That's going to prevent it from rolling around on you and make the process much easier. I had also cut some slits into the transfer sheet to make it contour around the bell better, and then just use the scraper tool to apply it. And that's it for this one. I was going for a vintage Christmas look here, and I think it is stunning.
One of the metal word signs from Magnolia, and I'm taking these skewer sticks from the Dollar Tree. They're the small ones that are out all year long, and I'm going to start measuring them out to the size I want my letters to be. I started with one of the E's because I thought that would be the easiest letter for me to gauge how tall I wanted them to be. The vertical line of my E is 3 inches tall, and the horizontal lines are 2 inches. Once I had the skewers cut, I'm using my Starbond super glue with the accelerator to attach them together. I thought this glue would work the best with how tiny these skewers are and give that immediate hold once you spray the accelerator. I do have this product linked in my description box if you're interested. I continue to do this for all of my letters, cutting them down and gluing together until it spelled out peace. Once I had all of my letters, I'm taking 7 tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree and gluing them in a line. Then I glued the letters on top of the blocks. All that's left to do now is paint this to look like metal using Rust-Oleum hammered black spray paint. Now let's take a look at how mine compares to Magnolia. I had the supplies already on hand, but if you had to buy them, this would cost $2. The Magnolia version is 9 inches tall. I probably should have checked that before making mine, so mine could have been a little bit taller, but I still think it looks pretty close. But what do you guys think?
I'm starting with 2 sets of these Dollar Tree racetracks from the toy aisle. Now, yes, I'm making a lantern, and I know this has been done before, but I love making lanterns and wanted to make one for myself. So I started out cutting off the ends where the hole is, and you guys, this project was a struggle because I always want to do things different, and the height of one racetrack was not tall enough for me, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted the racetrack to sit flush against the circle base, so I cut the sides off of the track bottom and repeated that for all 4 tracks. Then I'm gluing the tracks down to the wood base. Since I had all 4 tracks glued down, I cut them down a little on top to be the height I wanted. And here's where things just started to go downhill on this project. I still wanted that rounded top of the lantern like you typically see with these, but I have 4 separate pieces. So I had the bright idea to cut the side of the track off 2 of the pieces so they would slide into the second track pieces. That actually worked really well, and I glued them together with my super glue. I thought that would have a stronger hold, but it ended up peeling right off, plus the top was now more pointed than rounded. So back to the drawing board. I picked up another set of the racetracks and thought I would round the tops and then add a little extension to the bottom to make it taller. So that has to work, right? Kind of. I cut a little piece of the plastic to attach the back and join the 2 pieces together that way. Oh, you also want to sand the plastic pieces before adding the glue. That helps them adhere better. So I glue the tracks back onto the wood circle, and they're just bowing where the 2 tracks meet. So I'm thinking, great, now what? This plastic is just so thin, it is not holding up. Then I thought to grab my giant popsicle sticks and added those for stability. So finally, this thing is coming together. Look at that. Now that I have the base of this lantern built, I wanted to add some detail to the tracks using my IOD Regal Trimmings mold. I have been finding so many awesome ways to use this mold, it was well worth it. This week I'm using my DAS air dry clay, and I'm going through this part quickly, but I do have more in-depth air dry clay videos on my channel, and we'll link one below for you. One thing I love about these IOD trim molds is how you can continue the pattern. There is no need to cut anything. You can make a continuous chain however long you need it. So I covered all of the tracks with this design and set it aside to dry. Next, I painted the clay and track with my black chalk paint. I did not paint the circle base though, and I'm warning you now, there is a lot of painting in this video. On top of the lantern, I had this decorative glass lid, which came off a Dollar Tree jar, and you're gonna see that coming up in another project shortly, but I glued it on top with E6000 and then painted that black as well. And next, I wanted to add feet to the bottom and found this old wooden piece thrifting. I'm not sure what it was meant to be, but I pulled 4 of the circles off and glued them to the bottom. Then I stained the circle with dark walnut, and that's it for this guy. Style it to fit your home decor, and this could also stay out all year long. Next project, I found this copper oval planter at a thrift store when I was on vacation in Virginia over the summer. I paid $3 for it, and I'm just going to start out by getting those tags off and then giving this a really good cleaning. I forgot to mention in the first project, I did not clean that metal
flower because I didn't want to remove any of the tarnishing that was already on there. But for this copper piece, I did want to give it a nice cleaning. Next, I'm taking some just Dollar Tree plastic bags and I'm going to fill the center of this so that it gives a little bit of height and I don't need to use as much filling. And then I'm taking this just cotton batting that you would use for upholstery, and I'm going to cut it down so that I can then kind of tuck this around those plastic bags that we inserted into the planter. And this is going to act as our snow. Next, I am taking these bottle brush Christmas trees that I bought in a variety pack last holiday season from Walmart. There were 2 larger trees, some medium trees, some smaller trees, just a really nice variety. And I'm going to start hot gluing those down on top of our fake snow just to add a little wintry forest scene inside of this copper planter. Super easy again, and I love the way this turned out. Metal is super trendy right now, so all of my projects today are going to incorporate some type of metal. But next I took another strip of my batting and I just kind of tucked it up underneath of my trees to add a little bit more snow detail, also covering up that plastic bottom of the trees that came on them. And then this just adds like an even more snowy effect. And that was it for this one. Again, so simple, and I love the way this turned out as well. This next project is super simple. I'm taking some drop cloth fabric that I have on hand. You can use any color fabric you want, just make sure it's solid and not a print. And I'm drawing a line to form a triangle. You'll want to cut out 2 triangles. Then I cut out 2 pieces of lace triangles. This is why you want to stay away from a printed fabric. It might be a little bit too busy with the lace. But using my detail tip hot glue gun, I put a very thin bead of glue along the edge of the fabric and attached the lace right on top. And it's okay if you don't cut the triangles exact. I just took my roller and rotary blade to clean up the edges. Now I'm gluing the 2 lace and drop cloth triangle pieces together. You want to make sure to glue them with the lace sides facing each other. If you haven't figured out yet, we're making another type of tree here. You could also sew the edges if you're skilled enough and have a sewing machine to do so. I only glued 2 of the sides and not the bottom. Then I let the glue dry for a minute and flipped it inside out so the lace is now on the outside. It was a little difficult to get the top out. I used a dowel and just kept pushing it through and pulling the top of the fabric until it was all the way out. Next, I'm taking polyfill to put inside the trees. And again, I used the dowel to make sure the tip of the tree is nice and filled in, and stuff the trees as full as you want them. Now for the trunk of the tree, I grabbed a few spindle pieces that I took off of a thrifted chair and cut them down at different points, so I had 3 different sizes. Then I put the spindle inside the tree and glued the bottom shut. I did put a generous amount of glue on the top of the spindle as well, and then glued the fabric on top of it.
So after I put the spindles in the tree, I decided I wanted the spindles to be a little bit darker. So I got out my DIY dark wax and added that directly on top of the wood, and I love how rich this looks. Here's a little tip for you. I know Sammy at Unicorn Dust Designs does this as well. Always use the same brush for your wax and just store it in a Ziploc bag. I have one brush for each wax that I have stored like this, and it makes it super easy and convenient.
This one, I'm back to the polymer clay, and I did something I said in my live I didn't want to do. I bought the pasta machine. Definitely not necessary for this project, but I do want to make earrings and I will need it for that. But back to this project, I rolled out my clay and stretched it out so my circle cutter would fit. And I repeated this 5 times, making 5 circles and stacking them on top of each other. And then I cut one last time with the cutter, so I had one thick circle and baked it in the oven. Now I had a completely different project in mind for this, but realized I would have needed to make my circle significantly bigger, so I changed my mind and decided to make this a super simple ornament. I grabbed one of these wood snowflakes I got from Dollar Tree last year, and it was the perfect size. And then to add a hole, since I had already baked this, it was actually really easy. I took a needle tool and just twisted while pushing until I had my hole. Okay, now I need my super glue again. So why does this happen to me? And why does everyone suggest this method? The glue nozzle is completely full of Vaseline. So I grabbed my needle to unclog it. Yep, big glob of Vaseline stuck inside. Then my needle got stuck and I couldn't get it out. So I need the pliers to get it out. Oh my God, you guys, I know I'm doing something wrong, but I just don't know what. So once I got it unclogged, I just added the glue to the back of the ornament, plopped it onto the clay circle, added a hanger, and there we go. This little Dollar Tree mailbox, and I painted it white. I gave it, I think, like 2 coats of white paint. And I almost gave up on this project halfway through, but I'm so glad that I ended up just taking the night and finishing it. I created these words that said special delivery, check twice, and then on the reverse side it says North Pole Post, naughty and nice, and it has those little check boxes. I do love the way this turned out, but initially I was using that Cricut transfer tape, and again, it just ripped off all of my paint. It ripped it off down to the box itself, like the original box, and I was very frustrated and upset. So I went to sleep, came back to it the next day, and I redid it, and it looks great. I love how this turned out. So then I just took some washi tape and put it around the entire mailbox, and I added in some red ticking stripes. I added 2 around, all the way around, and then 2 on each side at the bottom. I also added in little red check marks next to nice, and then on the checked twice. I don't think I show that though. So last I just took another piece of scrap wood that I had, and I took this deco mesh ribbon core that the ribbon came on. This ribbon core came from the deco mesh I used in my light up Christmas box present in my last video. I'll put a link to it in the cards if you haven't seen that already. And I painted those red, and I'm just gonna hot glue everything together. The hot glue turned out fine. It worked out well. I didn't need to add E6000 or anything like that. This is also purely a decorative piece and not going to be functional and being played around with. I also don't think I show it, but I added some white ribbon going up the post just to give it a little something extra like you would find at the North Pole. My mom helped me on that decision.
There was no way of getting that in the frame, but this turned out so cute. I love the little scene that I had created with these the candy cane lane and then those little like Santa Claus letters that I found at the Dollar Tree. This just looks so cute.
For this project, I am creating a watercolor tree that I saw on Magnolia's site. I have these real brush pens from Arteza. They're really cool. With the tip being a brush, you can make thick lines, thin lines, vary the width as you write, almost like calligraphy. You can also dip the pen into water to make them watercolor markers. I have the 48-piece set, and this also came with a water pen, so you can draw what you want and then go back and add the water. There are some really fun and cool things you can do with these. Now, I'm no artist, but I did practice this tree for a few days before actually sitting down to record it so that I could figure out what the best technique was. I started with my color that was the lightest when watered, which is the color Crocodile Green, and I made sure to keep dipping the pen into the water before applying it to the paper to make sure it would stay that light color. And then looking at the image from Magnolia on my phone, I just started drawing, trying to make the shapes I thought I was seeing. It looked to me like the brush strokes were kind of going up and down while also moving horizontally across the paper to give that tree branch look, and I hope that makes sense. On Magnolia's site, they do say this piece is handmade and each one is made to order, which I just love, but also no two are going to look the same. I tried to keep that in mind when my perfectionist brain kept getting frustrated that mine didn't look exactly like the Magnolia version. About 80% of my tree was done using this crocodile color. I just kept layering it up so it had different dark and light shades. The other two colors I added in were olive green and seaweed green. And I used seaweed green the least. It was a little bit brighter than I had wanted for this project. I actually didn't love any of the colors that I had to work with. I think they look pretty different from the Magnolia version, but it still turned out pretty well. Once I was pretty happy with how the tree looked, I grabbed these scrap wood pieces that I had from another project, and I'm going to use these as a border. I know the Magnolia version does not have a frame and there's a lot more white space, but I liked how the frame looks around this. And here's my version, which I would consider free since I've had these pens on hand for a while, and the Magnolia version, which is $140, but I completely understand that price given that each piece is handmade to order. What do you guys think? Would you ever try something like this? This project is not an original idea. I saw this on Pinterest and I'm sure it's been done plenty of times. And I won't bore you with watching me glue countless sets of blocks together, so here's what you will need to get started. 2 9-block sets, 4 4-block sets, and 16 2-block sets. Next, we're going to create 2 X's. You want to take one of the 9-block pieces and glue 2 of the 4-block pieces going straight out on either side from the center of the 9-block piece. And you want to do that 2 times. Then add one of the X's on top of the other and make sure all arms of the snowflake are evenly spaced. Now we need these little cube wood pieces from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue 2 of the 2-block pieces to each cube.
So you end up with a V shape, and you're gonna need 8 of these pieces. Now add the V's onto the snowflake. You want to start on the bottom part of the snowflake. Since we glued one X on top of the other, there's a part that's lower touching the table and a part that is higher. You want to start adding the V's onto the lower part, and I hope that makes sense. Then when I added the V's on the top section, I put a Jenga block under the snowflake arm so that when I push down on the cube, it doesn't break the snowflake and has some support. Next, we need to make a smaller V. So this time glue 1 block length onto a cube piece, and you need 8 of these pieces. Then I glued these on the same way, starting with the arms that were resting on the table, and then adding a Jenga block under the other arms to add them on. Then I added a cube right in the center of the snowflake. Now, the rest of this project is really customizable depending on your style and what you like in your home. I spray painted the entire snowflake white. And once the paint dried, I wanted to add a little bit of tan around the edges, but I got carried away and didn't like how it was starting to look, so I scrapped that and re-spray painted it. I just left it solid white, but you could distress it or paint the snowflake a color, add a white wax. That would actually be really beautiful, but the possibilities are endless here. This next project is inspired by the seller Woodland Edges. I love the look of this paper tree and knew it would be really easy to recreate. And for much less than $42 or the $70 if you go off the original price. Buying the paper was the most expensive part. I got these from Hobby Lobby at 69 cents each for the music note sheets and 59 cents for the solid. Unfortunately, I did not go on a 40% off day, so you could get this for even less. Then I went into my Cricut design space, but don't worry if you don't have a Cricut. I have an option for you too that will look exactly the same, so stick with me for just a minute. In design space, I went into images and searched for a scalloped square. This orange one is the one I selected and added it to my project, but I only want the outline of it, so I deleted all the other layers. Then resized the square to start at 6.5 inches. I made 3 of each size square, going down 1/2 inch at a time, all the way down to 1.5 inches. And for the solid paper, I cut out 2 squares of each size. Now, if you don't have a Cricut, don't worry. Find a pair of these fun shaped scissors and use those to cut your squares out. You'll get the exact same look, or if you don't have these scissors, use regular scissors and just cut a wavy line. For the tree stand, I found these decorative plastic bowls at Dollar Tree, and the shape and detail is perfect. I used 2 bowls and glued them together using my E6000 and hot glue for an immediate hold, and apparently I didn't record the E6000, but it's there. Then I also need some beads and a skewer stick to build the tree, so I spray painted all 3 pieces antique bronze. I planned on making 2 trees, so you'll see 2 sets here, but I ran out of time and only ended up making 1. Next, I attached the skewer to the bottom of the bowl using my super glue and then added a big dollop of hot glue. But looking back, I probably should have added some floral foam to the bottom and then glued the skewer into that foam. You won't see it, so I would suggest that instead for more stability. Now you just need to add the paper. I used my roller to find the center of the paper and then poked a hole through the center and added it onto the skewer. I followed a pattern since I cut out 3 of the music notes and 2 solid for each size. So I added 1 music note, 1 solid, 1 music, and then a bead. Then 1 solid, 1 music, and a bead. And I followed that pattern all the way up the tree. I made a pretty darn good educated guess because this was the perfect amount of paper and beads to fill up the skewer. Once I got to the top of the tree, I glued a slightly larger bead on the very top and then filled the center of the bead with hot glue and painted over it with my spray paint to match. Last, I added a little bit of dark wax to the base to bring out the details a little bit more. I'm starting out with some scrap wood from my garage and ripping the boards down to make them a little bit more narrow. I ended up with 2 pieces that are 13 inches by 3 inches and one 11-inch by 3 inch. And then I'm taking these even skinnier wood pieces. These are scraps from when my husband makes his flags, and I'm going to cut them down to be the brim of my snowman's hat. A square dowel would work just as well. Using my wood glue hot glue, I'm adding the wood pieces on at an angle. Now we can paint. I'm using ivory for the body and black for the hat, using a small detail brush for the brim where it meets the body. Now I probably could have painted the brim before gluing it down, but apparently I didn't think about that. Next, I'm going to work on their noses, and I knew I wanted to use air dry clay for this. I have this Crafter's Square terracotta color clay from the Dollar Tree, and as soon as I opened it, I knew it was not going to work. The clay was super dry and crumbly. It would not smooth out. So I looked at the directions, and it said you could add water to smooth it out. So I dipped my finger in water and added a tiny little bit at a time. That did help to smooth the clay, but I was not confident this was going to look good once it dried. So I also have this tub of Crayola terracotta air dry clay, and right away this looked much smoother. So I took a small amount of clay and rolled it into a ball with the palm of my hands, then started rolling it out like a snake. And I pressed one end of the snake against the table to flatten it and continued to roll out the other end to form a cone shape. And once I had my cone shape, I bent it a little bit to look more authentic, like a carrot. And here you can see how the Dollar Tree clay dried compared to Crayola, which turned out much better. While Crayola is not my favorite type of air dry clay, the terracotta one actually looks really nice. To add the clay noses, I found the center of my snowman, which was 1.5 inches, and then added a dot of my Starbond super glue and dried it with the accelerator. I do have this product linked in my description box. It is my favorite type of glue when you need a strong hold and don't want to wait for the dry time like E6000. Next, I'm taking this fabric quarter that I got from Walmart to make a scarf. I folded the fabric over 1/2 inch and used my hot glue to secure it down. This way the pattern will show on both sides of my scarf. And then using my rotary cutter and an L roller as a guide, I cut right along the edge and made 3 scarves just like this, then tied them around my snowman using hot glue to tack it down where needed. Now the snowmen are complete, but the Pinterest inspiration had them sitting in a bucket. I've had this Dollar Tree galvanized bucket on hand and removed the twine. I'm not going to use the twine today, but did hold on to it for a future project. The galvanized tin does not exactly go with my decor, so I'm using some spray paint to change it.
I used antique brass, hammered burnished amber, and hammered black, just misting them lightly over the bucket and layered each color while it was still wet. And I love the rich color this turned out using that technique. Next, I'm taking this faux fur ribbon I got on clearance last year after Christmas. That's when you can find some of the best deals. And I hot glued it around the top of the bucket, allowing half of the ribbon to stick out above the bucket, and then folded it inside for a cozy vibe. Now, my version is a lot less rustic than the Pinterest one, so this is more inspired by it than a dupe, but what do you guys think? For this project, I am taking a medium and then a large wreath ring, and I'm going to glue them together where the edges touch using my Starbond super glue. Hot glue is not going to work here. It does not stick to metal. You could also use E6000, but then you'd have to wait for that to dry. Gluing the sides is also going to help with this next step. I'm going to be taking this chenille yarn. I believe I got this from the Dollar Tree, but I really can't remember. And we're going to use this to start wrapping it around the rings. And that's why you want to glue those two ends together. Otherwise, your rings are just going to start moving around with you as you start wrapping the yarn. I'm going to wrap my yarn all the way around the rings, kind of forming a moon or crescent shape. And I really did not need to use much hot glue here. I used it at the very beginning to tack the yarn down to the metal rings. And then as I started going down the second side, I needed to use a little bit more glue more frequently than I did going up on the first side. And I think that was just because of gravity and wanting to pull it down. Next, I'm taking this Merry MDF sign that I got from the Dollar Tree. I got this last year, but they are carrying these again this year as well. And I'm taking my Fawn Waverly chalk paint. This is my favorite color right now. I have been using it on so many projects, but I'm going to give this Merry sign one coat of the fawn colored paint. And then I'm going to take my black chalk paint and I'm going to paint all the way around the border of the Merry sign. So this part is definitely time consuming, but I think details like this really elevate your projects, making them look more like they were purchased in the store, which is really what I'm always trying to achieve in my DIY projects. I also found that doing the inner portion of the words, it was helpful to come from the back and then fill it in that way, so I wasn't worrying about getting the black chalk paint on the front of my word and then having to go back and try and cover that up with it being so dark. I thought it was still missing a little bit of detail, so taking this embossing tool, I also picked this up from the Dollar Tree, and then the color Warm Buff, which is an apple barrel acrylic paint, and I'm just adding some stitching marks all the way around the outside and then also the inside little portions of my letters. And I think this was the perfect finishing detail for this word. Next, I just hot glued my MDF sign down on top of the yarn, and that worked fine. This isn't very heavy, so the hot glue works for this part. And then I'm just taking some greenery pine that I have. I actually got this on a garland from Hobby Lobby, 50% off. I absolutely love the realistic look of it. And then I took these mini pine cones that I also got from Hobby Lobby, added them in sporadically, and that was it for this one. I absolutely love the way this turned out. I can't pick a favorite today. I love all of these so much. They are very in line with my style, but let me know, what do you think?
I have been looking for spindles everywhere in my area, found this trio of chairs at the Goodwill bins for only $6 for 3. I knew I could take them apart and use the spindles, so that's exactly what I'm doing. For this project, I'm only using 3 of the spindles in 3 different sizes and sanded them down a little bit, only because there were some nicks in the wood and scratches and I wanted to smooth those out. Then I painted all 3 white. I love these round brushes for painting spindles. They make it so easy. This one's from Dixie Belle, but I know there are others out there. Next, I'm painting the tops of the spindles black because these are going to be little snowmen and the top is their hat. I wanted each snowman to have a different face, so I drew it on with pencil first and then filled them in with the black paint and then orange paint for the carrot nose. I wanted to put the snowmen in a group as a little family, and I had this decorative wood piece from Dollar Tree, so I stained it in dark walnut. Then I attached the spindles to the wood piece by drilling a pilot hole and then screwed them in. But I definitely did not wait long enough for the stain to dry. I got my stain-covered fingers all over the white paint and had to touch it up. I also should have thought about giving them buttons before attaching them, but that's okay. I went in with my dotting tool and added them all down the front. Then to dress them up a little bit, I grabbed some fabric that I have and cut strips for a scarf. I wish I had more of this Dollar Tree cotton fabric in another print because I used an actual scarf for 2 of the snowman and it's actually a little bit bulky. But that's it for these guys. I think they are super adorable.
Next up, I found this adorable sled at Goodwill for $2.99, and I'm going to start by cleaning it off, and this is going to be another really easy project. I cut off the twine because it had definitely seen better days and gave the whole thing a scuff sand just to scratch up the surface for the paint to adhere better. I know there are people who believe you do not need to prep a surface for sanding prior to adding chalk paint. However, I like to take this added step just to ensure my project is going to last longer. After sanding, I use my little tabletop vacuum to clean up the dust. I love this thing. It is linked in my description box. And then taking my favorite paint color at the moment, Fawn by Waverly, painting just the rails of the sled. Is that what they're called? I'm not sure. For the top of the sled, I'm using Ivory by Waverly. I did have to give the top 3 coats of paint to cover up that orange wood tone. I'm not a big fan of distressing, but I do think some pieces look good with it. This was one of those pieces, so I took a 220 grit sandpaper and took off the white paint to show some of the wood underneath, adding to that natural vibe I'm going for, and just on the edges of the sled. I love the Scandi forest inspiration I've been seeing lately and wanted to add some thin little trees to this decor piece. So I started out with a pencil but quickly abandoned that and just went in with a thin black Sharpie to keep it feeling organic. After I was happy with the trees, I added a new twine hanger, knotted it in the front, and then burned off the frayed bits. If you're not comfortable with this step, don't do it. It's not necessary. I just like the way it looks, but that was it for this one. This project, I cut 2 strands of 4mm macrame cord at 12 feet each. I had a lot of cord left over. This was the second time I did this one. The first time I ran out of macrame, which is the worst thing when doing these kinds of projects. I think 9 feet would be good, but 12 definitely worked out for me. So you want to start out with a lark's head knot, which is where you fold your cord in half, put the center of the fold under your ring, and pull the ends of the cord through the loop. And we're going to do that 2 times. Next, we'll be creating square knots, and that's the only knot used to make this tree. So to make a square knot, you use the 2 outer strands, leaving the center 2 strands stationary. And we're going to start with a 4. You're going to make a 4 with the string on your left and put the right string over top of the straight line from the 4. Take the end of your right cord under and behind the stationary center strands and up through the hole of your 4 and then pull that tight. This is 1/2 of the knot. Next, you repeat this going the opposite direction. So take the outer right strand and create a backwards 4 with the outer left strand over top of the straight horizontal line. Take the end of the left strand behind the stationary strands and through the center of your backwards 4. This time we do not want to pull it completely tight, and this is what will start to create the loops for the tree. So each knot we do, we're going to leave a little loop slightly longer than the one before. Hopefully that makes sense, but you'll see it as it goes. So moving on, we will create another 4, repeating the first half of the square knot, pulling it tight to hold the loose half of the square knot in place. Now going on to the second loop of the tree, you want to create the second half of the square knot using the backwards 4. And I kind of squish the strings together to see how long I want this loop to be before starting the next knot that's going to hold it in place. Then you're just going to repeat this process, so I'm going to let it play all the way through in case this is something you want to recreate, or feel free to skip through to see the final result. But if you're enjoying this video, I hope you will like and subscribe. That really helps my channel to grow. After you have your macrame tree as long as you want it, I left a little bit of space at the bottom to act as like the trunk of the tree. And then I'm going to take my remaining 4 strands of macrame cord and we're going to place them underneath of the ring. Now we're going to tie off a knot on the bottom of the ring so that we can make sure the tree is going to stay in place. The way you're going to do this, we're going to take any of your strands, or you're going to do all 4 of them the same exact way. So you're going to start by looping your strand to the left side of itself. So up around the ring to the left side, pull that through. So you're just making a loop, and then you're going to do the same thing, looping it onto the right side. However, on this time, when you pull it through the ring, you want to pull it through the loop that you created underneath. So I hope that makes sense. I know explaining macrame can be very difficult, but you can see what I'm doing as well. I will show you a couple of times. Next, we're going to add a wrap portion to the bottom of the macrame hanging. This part is not necessary. You could just end it here, comb out your macrame cords, and be done with it. I like to add that finishing detail of the wrap at the end and then have my fringe. So we need a 5th strand to do this, and I just cut off a portion of one of my longer strands left over rather than cutting out a new piece and wasting it. And you want to tuck it underneath of your 4 strands so that that's in the back of your wrap. And then you're going to create a loop. So just making sure that your loop is longer than the wrap portion that you want. And then we're just going to take that string and wrap it all the way around our 4 cords and then also that loop that we just created. You want to make sure the loop is inside of your wrap. Then you're just going to wrap the cord as many times as you want, as long as you want your wrapped section to be. And to finish it off, you're going to take the end of the cord you are wrapping with, and you're going to put it through the loop that we created in the beginning. And then pull both ends. So you want to make sure the end where you started is sticking out above your wrap. And then you're going to pull both ends, and that is going to create a knot and also conceal your knot inside of the wrap. Then you're going to cut off your strands to make your fringe as long as you want it. Comb it out. I'm just using a little hair comb here to comb out the strings, and then I'm taking my flat iron to straighten them out. And lastly, I'm just going to take this decoupage glue. I am using this to hold my strands in place, like the branches of my tree, because they were getting a little bit twisted and not staying together. So this is just going to ensure that my tree is going to stay in the exact shape that I want it to stay in. And that was it for this one. I know this was a long project. I appreciate you sticking with me, but what do you think of the final result?
Next, I'm taking 2 of these 'Tis the Season wood signs from the Dollar Tree and painting those white. And I'm using a homemade chalk paint here. And then I take some E6000 and a little bit of hot glue and glue those 2 boards together. So then I cut out with my Cricut the phrase, "the most wonderful time of the year," and I keep telling myself I am not going to use those skinny cursive fonts. They look so beautiful, but they are so difficult to weed. I love the way this looks, but they are really hard to work with. Anyways, I put wonderful right in the center across both of the wood planks where they meet. And then I add in the most up to the top left and time of the year to the bottom right. Does anyone else have that problem? You can see on the wonderful how the E and then the F, they have those like solid black lines there, or they're like filled in. And every time I try to weld my letters together after I had them where I wanted, it kept just filling those 2 spots in, and I have no idea why. I no matter what I did, it wasn't changing, and I wanted to have them welded together or it wouldn't have printed out correctly. So I don't know how to fix that. I think I might just have to like make it larger and then scale it down, but I'm not sure. And I'm also using my Target transfer tape. Again, I have not used that Cricut transfer tape since it was pulling my paint off. I will probably try and use it again eventually, maybe on something that's more like wood stained and not painted, but we'll see. So then I'm just taking my elephant gray chalk paint and I'm doing a very, very light dry brush with this, mostly on the edges and very, very tiny bit in the center. You can see how minimal that is on there. Very light. So now I'm just taking these bottle brush trees that I got from Walmart in various colors and sizes and just placing them wherever I think they look nice. I ended up using 5 trees. And then once I have them where I think looks nice, I just hot glue the bottoms. And that's it for this project. I think, again, this looks super modern, super
classic and beautiful and goes really well with my home decor.
I'm taking 2 Dollar Tree paper lanterns. I think you can get these all year long in the party aisle, but don't quote me on that. This gold one came with 2 different sizes, which is perfect because we're making a snowman. Now you can buy white paper lanterns, but I already had these gold ones. They've been laying around my craft room forever, and I knew eventually I would come up with something to make. So I painted them with my chalk paint. Spray paint would probably be quicker and easier since these are paper and pretty delicate, but I didn't have enough white spray paint. Once the paint was dry, I glued the smaller lantern on top of the larger one, and then I needed a base for the snowman to sit on because he has a little metal piece sticking out of the bottom. So I grabbed a little shadow box to use and added a few Jenga blocks for the metal pieces to sit between. Next, I need a hat for the snowman and just looked around my craft room for things I could use. I found this thin wood circle and a metal bucket. I removed the handle off the bucket and then glued it to the circle and painted everything black. I never mentioned this in my videos, but I used this silicone mat on top of my work surface, which you can paint directly on and it wipes right up. Usually I'll take it over to my sink to clean up, but sometimes I will wipe up a small area right away, and you can see just how easily this comes clean with a baby wipe. And this is also linked in my description box. Now we need to bring the snowman to life. I picked up this wood-shaped variety pack a long time ago from the Dollar Tree and grabbed the 3 different size circles for his buttons and face. I painted these black as well. Then for his nose, I'm using terracotta clay and rolled it into a carrot shape. I totally forgot to hit record when I started adding the pieces onto the snowman, so his buttons and eyes are glued down, and then I added his hat and mouth. The clay nose is still drying, so I moved on to his arms. I had this large branch and cut a few pieces off to use. I did have to cut a little hole in the paper lantern to stick his arms in and put a generous amount of hot glue to hold them in place. Now, snowmen need a scarf, right? So I grabbed this snowflake fabric and cut a strip for his scarf. I wanted to take it a step further by adding fringe to the ends, so I cut thin strips all along the edge. Did you know you can also fill your silicone molds with hot glue? I created a few different snowflakes with this hippo glue gun and painted them white once they completely cooled down. Then I added them onto my snowman for some little embellishments, and that's it for this guy. He is so stinking cute. I love him. this first project, I'm taking a 1.5-inch wood ring and then 10 30-inch 4mm macrame cords, and we are going to attach them to the wood ring using a lark's head knot. Once you have all 10 of your strands added to the wood ring, then I'm going to take 2 more strands the same length and I'm going to comb them out. This is going to act as the body of our angel, and then the strands we just added are going to be the wings. Next, we're going to start doing a double half hitch knot all the way around the edges of our wings. So to do this, you are going to start out with a guide strand, and that is going to be the very first one in the center, wherever you want your center to be, and you're going to take that over top of the next strand next to it. And then to create your knot, you are going to make a 4 and then loop it around. This is basically going to create a loop, pull your string through and pull it tight. And you want to do that 2 times for each strand. If at any point you think I am going too fast here, you can slow the video down in the settings. You're going to create this double half hitch knot 18 times. You're going to have 18 individual knots going across 5 of the original strands that you added. So this is going to take up half of your angel. And once you have that first side complete, you're going to repeat the process on the second side to create both sets of the wings. And when you get to the second side, you're going to be doing this backwards, opposite from the way you did it the first time. So you're going to be coming to the left. Your guide rope is going to be coming to the left, and you're going to be creating a backwards 4 to make your loop. And then once I got to the end, my very last knot, I just tied off a basic knot at the bottom so that it wouldn't come untied. And then we're just going to comb out all of the wing ropes. And then I took my straightener and I'm just straightening those out before we cut them down to the size that we want them to be. Now, I didn't think that the body portion that I had was quite thick enough. I had only used 1 strand here, so I added in another one. That's why I said at the beginning to just do 2 strands to begin with. And then I thought it looked a little bit better. And I had it at a lark's head knot, but decided I just wanted to gather it and make it look like it was 2 separate knots. And I thought that made the body portion look a little bit better. And then I just wrapped it with a small piece of my Dollar Tree faux leather ribbon in the gold color. Now I'm just going to cut her body portion to the length that I want the tassel to be. And I always just cut off my strands where I want them, comb it out again, and you're always going to have a few stragglers that are longer and don't cut correctly. So I always just go back and forth combing it and cutting. For the angel's head, I just took an 18mm bead. I think this was an 18. It might be a 10. But anyways, we're just going to hot glue it right on top of her body in the center. And now we're going to cut her wings to shape. This actually took me quite a while to figure out how I wanted them to look. I didn't want to cut too short at first, so I just kept cutting away at it little by little, combing it out, cutting it away where I thought it needed to be cut. I also added some glue. This is decoupage glue. You could use Mod Podge, you could use school glue, whatever you wanted, just to make sure those knots are not going to come undone.
I'm going to be using these wire wreath ring forms that you can find at the Dollar Tree. I've only been able to find these once, but I picked up 2 packs of them, and I'm going to take them out to my garage to spray paint them using this Rust-Oleum antique brass color. I just didn't like the color that they came in, but they do sell other colors. I think they come in black, silver, and then this brass color. Next, I'm taking this reindeer that I also found at the Dollar Tree, and I started painting it with my black chalk paint. However, I always find chalk paint to scratch off of surfaces like this pretty easily unless you seal it either after you're done painting, in between coats, but put some type of sealer on it, and I just didn't want to go through all of that. So instead, I decided to spray paint it with my Rust-Oleum flat black spray paint. While I wait for all of my paint to dry, I'm taking this scrap piece of wood that I had laying around. It is 7 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and 1 inch thick, and I'm going to find the center of my scrap piece of wood. Now, you do not have to use a scrap piece of wood if you don't have something like that for this step. You could use floral foam, you could use Jenga blocks. Dollar Tree also sells scrap wood right now, although you can get it much cheaper at the hardware store, but that's a story for another day. Point is, you can use other things if you do not have random scrap wood just lying around. I marked on my wood where the ring was going to sit at, and that's where I'm going to create a little slit in the wood. If you were using floral foam, you wouldn't need to do this step. You could just push that wreath ring down into the floral foam, glue it in place, and you're good to go. Or if you used Jenga blocks, you could just glue them on either side of the wreath ring to hold it in place as your base. I'm using a wood burning tool to create my slit. Probably not the easiest method, but it's all I could find at the time. You could also use a small chisel or a knife depending on how hard or soft your material used for the base is. Once I had my slit cut out, I'm just taking my Starbond super glue. I love this stuff. I have it linked in my description box. And then with the accelerator, I'm just going to hold it in place until it dries. Now I'm just taking some burlap to cover up the base and kind of hide where we have everything glued together, and then I'm going to hot glue it in place. My camera battery died, but you get the idea. I just basically wrapped it like a present using my hot glue. Then I'm going to glue my little reindeer down in place. I put him right on the very edge of the left side of my wood base, and then I'm going to take these floral picks that I got from Walmart in the 98-cent section. I love their Christmas floral picks. They have the best quality and they are so affordable. But I'm going to take out the berries and that additional little greenery flocked piece. I am going to use the additional greenery part, but not the berries at all. Then I'm just taking some floral wire and I'm going to wrap it around the wreath ring, holding my picks in place. And lastly, I am just adding in these macrame snowflakes that I made. I did not show them in this video, but stay tuned until next week because I have a whole macrame ornament video coming up.
This one is Pinterest inspired. I think these ornament present boxes are stunning and wanted to make one that fits my home's color palette. My dad actually found this trunk sitting on the side of the road and knew I could do something creative with it. I love the shape and leather accents, but not so much that world map on it. So I cleaned it up really well and then started taping off the brown edges and leather straps, but quickly abandoned that because I do have a pretty steady hand when it comes to painting, and this was just taking too long. So you're gonna see only one spot is actually taped off. Then I painted the trunk white and I think I gave it 3 coats. Now, to add in the ornaments, I had these large buffalo check bulbs from Dollar Tree last year. They were the perfect size, but I didn't want the black. So I sanded that black glitter off and then spray painted them white. I wanted this piece to have lots of texture and different textiles because it's going to be neutral, so I covered 2 ornaments in different fabrics, one in a thrifted sweater and then one in lace. I will say trying to cover a ball with fabric and make it look smooth was extremely difficult. If you have any tips on how to make it look smooth, please let your girl know in the comments because I seriously struggled. I knew you would not see the entire ball on this project though, so one end looks pretty rough. I also had a Dollar Tree bouncy ball from the kids section that I painted white and covered this one with that plush white car towel. These are going to be the 3 largest ornaments. The rest of the ornaments and embellishments I either picked up at Hobby Lobby or raided my craft stash looking for anything that was white, beige, or brown in various sizes. I'm not gonna lie, this was a pretty expensive project to make. Initially, I thought I'd be able to just pull from ornaments I already owned, but I wanted a very specific look and decided to just buy the bulbs that would match. Then it was just a matter of adding everything onto the box. The leather straps were not gonna work, so I did cut those off, and I wanted it to look like a cascade of ornaments spilling out of the box. So I placed the largest ornaments on first and then filled in from there. I thought it needed some more green to liven it up a little bit and pulled from various picks that I have and added little sprigs here and there. This is a project where I feel like more is more. I know most times I prefer a simpler look, but I love how this one turned out. It's so elegant and could fit into so many home decor styles, from glam to farmhouse to boho. It is quite versatile, and all of the textures and similar color tones add so much dimension. First project, I'm making a modern snowman. You're going to take 8 blocks and glue them along sides together and make 2 rows like this. I use Dollar Tree wood glue super glue for my Jenga block projects to get a cleaner look. You can definitely use hot glue, but it does leave a small gap between the blocks, which I don't like, but that's just personal preference. Once you have both rows put together, glue one on top of the other, and this is the snowman's face. Next, I'm gonna build his hat. I decided to make 2 rows of 4 blocks for the brim of his hat. This time you wanna glue them end to end. Now for the top of his hat, I wanted it to be a little bit narrower than the face to differentiate it, so I used 7 blocks and centered them over the face. That's it for the building portion. Now we need to paint our little friend. Nothing groundbreaking here. I painted the hat black and his face white. So shocking for a snowman, I know. Once the paint dried, it's time to decorate him. Like I said in the beginning, this is a modern snowman, so I'm not giving him a face. You absolutely could if you wanted to, but I've made quite a few snowmen this year in 2022 that I wanted to do something different. I have this metal ribbon from Dollar Tree and cut a piece to fit across the brim of his hat. Now, silver's not a color that I gravitate towards, so I grabbed my brushed gold acrylic paint and dabbed it on top of the metal. Already, I love this color so much better, but to take it a step further, I added a dark wax on top. I used my Star Bond super glue with the accelerator to attach the metal. Super glue is the best option for metal. Then I realized some of the black hat was sticking out a little bit under that metal ribbon, so I touched that up with a detail brush in my white paint, and it looks so much better. Next, I added a few pine pieces and a pine cone to the corner of his hat, and that's it for this little guy. Let me know, do you like the modern snowman with no face, or do you think he should have had a face? I'm taking 2 Dollar Tree wood rollers and 2 5-gallon paint stir sticks. On the rollers, I'm going to remove the colorful measurement stickers. Then I want to cut all the sticks down to remove that hole on the rollers and then also that handle on the paint sticks. We're going to create Christmas trees, and I wanted 2 different sizes. Then I'm taking some hot glue to attach the sticks at the top. You could use a stronger adhesive, but there will be more elements to this, so the hot glue is just fine. Next, I grabbed some poster board to cover up the face of the trees. My son really wanted to be part of this video, so he grabbed his shark puppet named Chomp, and Chomp had to make an appearance and help cut the poster board.
Oh, are you recording?
I will say I didn't really think this part through though. We will be adding clay on top, and the weight was probably a little too heavy for the poster board. Foam core board or cardboard would work much better, but I made the poster board work. Now for the decorative elements, I'm using the Sculpey air dry clay. I have not used this brand for air dry clay before, but I love their polymer clay. Usually I use Das air dry clay, and I really love that brand. Next, I'm taking this Regal Trimmings mold from IOD, and I'm going to use all of the different trims to cover the face of the tree. I got this idea from Pinterest and thought it was so beautiful. You always want to make sure to dust cornstarch in your mold before adding the clay. That way it doesn't stick and comes out easily. Then I like to roll my clay into a snake before pushing it into the mold, but I do see some people just take a ball of clay and go straight in, so whatever works for you. I like to smooth out the top as much as possible, and I saw Sammy from Unicorn Dust Designs use her Cricut scraper to do this recently. It was such a good idea, and it works really well. Then to attach the mold pieces, I'm using my Titebond Quick and Thick glue, and I added the clay while it's still wet. I could see right away when I put that first piece down, the poster board was bowing in the middle, and instead of just getting something stiffer right away, I took another roller and placed it in the middle just to temporarily hold it up. Don't ask me why, I probably should have just gotten something more sturdy. Then I used my tissue blade to cut that excess trim off the sides. This is linked in my description box and is a must-have tool in my opinion when working with clay. I alternated between all of the different trims in this mold and added them all the way up the tree. And my son was really into helping me this day, so you're gonna see him helping as well. He did a really great job. I let the clay dry overnight and I really enjoyed this brand. It did not shrink or crack as it dried. However, the tree was front heavy and would not stand up on its own. No fault to the clay, so I glued a few Jenga blocks to the back. That didn't help. So I grabbed some Dollar Tree rocks and stacked those up on top of the Jenga blocks to help weigh the back down. I did not put a back on this tree, but I do want to go back and do that just to finish it off and make it look a little bit nicer and also hide those rocks inside. Next, I painted my tree in the color Sandcastle by Dixie Belle to go with my home decor. You could paint this any color you like and then let it dry. Then I took Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in white to bring out all those gorgeous details in the molds. I painted the second larger tree in a slightly darker color called Burlap and gave it that same white wax as well. You could also do a dark wax or even dry brush over the top with a pop color. The possibilities are endless. And I found this beautiful macrame wreath from the seller Rusty Orchid. I will link all of the shops I duped today down in my description box, but I picked up this single twist 3mm macrame cord from Hobby Lobby for $6.99 in the color Fern, only because they were sold out of white and I actually really love how this color turned out. So I cut 66 pieces at 30 inches each. Next, I picked up these 3 packs of wreath rings from the Dollar Tree. I grabbed several of these because I only ever see them at Christmas time, but I'm only using the middle size, which is 8 inches, and going to add all 66 macrame cords using a lark's head knot. This is a basic macrame knot to get you started with almost any project. Take a strand and fold it in half. Take the middle of the cord and place it under the wreath ring. Take the ends of the strand over top of the ring and down through the loop and pull that tight. Once all 66 pieces are added to the wreath ring, now we can start the fun part. So take a group of 6 knots and section those off. And then take the center 2 knots, so you have 4 cords. Now we're going to make a diagonal double half hitch knot. There are 2 knots we're going to use on this piece, and this is the main one. Next, take 2 cords, and the outermost cord on the right is going to be your guide or your stationary cord. This is going to create the diagonal. So you pull that cord towards the left, and then take the cord next to it to create the knot. The way I think of this is really simple. So you create a U and pull it through, and you do this 2 times. Keep your stationary cord pulled toward the left and take that working cord, make a U over top of the stationary cord, wrap it around and pull the end through the U, then pull that tight. Then do the same thing on the next 2 cords. This time your stationary cord will go toward the right, then make a U and pull it through. Now we need to connect the two sections. You can go in either direction, either keep going to the right or go to the left, but whichever way you go, make sure you do the same all the way around the wreath. And this is going to create a little triangle. Next, we're going to repeat this process 2 more times for the remaining cords out of the 6 that we had pulled out to start with. So you'll end up with 3 rows forming a slightly bigger triangle each time. And then repeat this around the entire wreath. So you'll end up with 11 triangle sections. Next, I want to add the little berries like the inspiration had. I'm going to use white cord for this instead of red, but you could use any colors you choose. This is 2mm cord and I cut it down to 30 inches. You're going to need 11 pieces just like this. Now you're going to take 2 cords in the center where 2 triangle edges meet. This is where we will attach the white cord. This time we're making a square knot, and to do that you place the middle of the white cord under the 2 green cords. Then make a 4 with the left strand over top of the green ones. Pull the right white cord on top of the straight portion of the 4, and then take the end of the right cord behind the green cords and up through the center of the 4, and then pull that tight. Now the white cord is attached and you want to slide it up as far as you can towards the wreath ring. That was only half of the square knot, so now you want to do the same thing starting on the right, creating a backwards 4, and then pull the left cord on top of the straight section of the backwards 4. Then take the end of the left cord behind the green cords, up through the center of the backwards 4, and pull that tight. Then repeat this 5 more times to make 6 square knots in total. There will naturally be some gaps between your knots, so once you make all 6, push the last knot up so the whole thing squishes together. Now to make this look like a berry, you want to flip it up, and there's a little hole at the top right between the 2 triangles, and push all 4 cords down through that hole. Next, we're going to create a few more square knots. So take the 2 green cords that we just used for the berry, and then 1 from each side, so you have 4 green cords. You also want to hold the white cords in the center with the 2 green cords so you can conceal them. So create a square knot just like we did before, but push the first knot up as high as you can, right up against that berry to hold it in place. And once you finish the square knot, cut the ends of the white cords. Now take the 2 right cords from the square knot we just made and 2 more to the right of it to make another square knot. And then do the same thing on the left side. Next, we want to join the 2 together and create 1 more square knot with the 4 center cords. So you'll end up having a little diamond shape of 4 square knots. Then we need to create 2 more rows of the diagonal double half hitch knot to complete this section. So you want to start with the second cord in from the left to start this first row, and then the same with the one to the right. Start with the second cord in from the right, and use the 2 outside cords to create the second row. That completes the section, and you want to repeat this all the way around the wreath. Next, I want to cut down all of the cords. I used the shortest piece I could find as a starting point and cut down the rest of the cords to be roughly the same. This doesn't need to be exact at this point. And then I combed out the twist to make it more fluffy. And now to clean up the edges and give the wreath its shape, I used my roller and rotary blade to make the cords all the same length. You could also use scissors. I just found this method to work really easy, and it was super precise and took up less time. Taking 5 of these MDF snow globes from the Dollar Tree and using a Dollar Tree scraper to remove the stickers on the back. I want to paint the backs instead of trying to cover up the fronts. I also removed the jute twine, and I'm not going to use that at all. Then using my ivory chalk paint gave the fronts 2 coats, and I also painted the edges of the globes with my black chalk paint. Next, I'm using washi tape so I can add the base of the globe, again using my black chalk paint.
So I'm taking this faux leather ribbon, the kind of champagne gold color, around the edge right here. So the first one I did, if you can see, there's kind of like a gap on this side, and that's because I just cut it and then glued it down, but I realized I needed to wrap it around the side. Because look, if you just glue it down, I didn't take the black up far enough, if you can see that little gap there. So you kind of need to maneuver it down into that groove there to cover it up. So what I did was hold it, put it where it needs to go, hold it with my thumb, glue the end, and then it's going to sit exactly where it should be without having that gap. So I'm going to have to fix that other one, which is totally fine. That one's good. Hold it where I need it with my finger. And there we go. So now there is no gap on this one compared to the little gap right here on that one.
For the clay element of this project, I'm using paper clay, which is an air dry clay. Like I said earlier, this is not my preferred type of clay to use, but you do not need to bake it, and I know a lot of crafters do like the air dry clay. It's just a lot softer and more sticky in my opinion. It was sticking to my roller, sticking to my knife. It was making a mess and then drying out, making my clay look rough. But anyways, I wanted to make letters to go on the snow globes, and it took me a little bit to figure this out, so I rolled out my clay and then cut it down into a 3" by 3" square. I knew I didn't want the letter to be bigger than that, so it would fit onto the globe. And then I just freehand cut out the letters to the best of my ability. Now you could absolutely use something other than clay for this. You could use stickers or a Cricut machine or even MDF or wood letters from a craft store. Once I had all of my letters and the clay was dry, I did stick it in the oven to speed up the dry time, but I'm not really sure if you're supposed to put air dry clay in the oven. After they were dry, I needed to sand these down since the air dry clay is a lot harder to get a clean look in the beginning. You can use water and a paintbrush or your finger to smooth it out, but that just makes even a bigger mess and I wasn't feeling it. Next, I wanted to paint my letters and use this Magnolia paint by Joanna Gaines and the color Olive Grove. Thanks, Brandy, for helping me with that decision. I did not paint the backs, but did get the edges. Now to add the letters onto the globes, I'm using my favorite quick dry glue Star Bond. And Kimberly, this part's for you, girl. I tried putting the tip in Vaseline, but of course the nozzle got clogged with the Vaseline. So just wait till the next project. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong, but anyways, I thought I was done here, then after staring at it, realized it was missing something. So how about the stitching like I added on my Mary Wreath ring DIY a little while back? So I used a regular Sharpie marker and perfect, now it's complete. I'm starting out with this frame, which I picked up from Habitat for Humanity probably about a year ago and had turned it into a display shelf, but I'm no longer using the shelf and wanted to repurpose this. If you want to see how I created the original shelf, I will link that video in the description below. But the frame is 17 inches by 14 inches, and I'm cutting down a piece of foam core board to be my backing. Next, I bought this chunky sweater from the Goodwill and cut out the back of it. This is going to be the background, and I just love the texture and cozy vibe that this adds. To attach the sweater, I'm using my Gorilla hot glue, and to make sure I got the sweater to look straight, I took one of the straight lines on the knit and used that as my guide. So after gluing the bottom, I went to the top. That way I didn't end up stretching out one side more than another, and was careful not to pull the sweater too taut to shift the pattern on the front of it. Once all of the sides were glued down, I cut off the excess and glued the frame on top. Now to add the detail, I had this almost perfectly sized scrap piece of leather and just cut it down slightly so it measures 12 inches by 4 inches. But I didn't really care for the color, so I'm taking several different paint colors and a sponge and just experimenting, playing around until I get the look I'm after. Next, I cut out the word believe with my Cricut, and I used the font Agency FB. I'm going to use this as a stencil. I like using Dollar Tree contact paper to make my stencils to keep the cost low for something I'm just going to throw away. I always forget to make sure there's a border around stencils, so no surprise here, I forgot to do that. Learn from my mistakes. Make sure you add a rectangle, a circle, a square, whatever the shape of your stencil cutout is going to be. I ended up having to add some painter's tape so that I wouldn't get the paint on my leather where I didn't want it. Oh my gosh, you guys. Next, I made such a mess. I forgot I had already opened the lid of my black paint. picked it up to shake it, and yeah, I'm sure you can guess what happened next. It went all over my project, my hand, my craft mat. What a mess. But I recovered, cleaned it up, added the black paint to my stencil using a sponge dabber. And then after I added the stencil, I went back and fixed the part of my leather where the black paint had spilled on it, and it looks good as new. Nothing ever happened here. Now we just need to attach the leather to the sweater. I used my hot glue again for this. And added one last detail with these nail head trim pieces I had on hand to each corner, and that was it for this one. If you couldn't tell by my last 2 Christmas videos that I have posted so far this season, I am going for a very cozy, natural materials, Scandinavian, neutral vibe this Christmas, and I'm absolutely loving it. For this project, I was planning to make 2 of the same thing and started the first one off camera. I found these little barn doors at Target last year around the holidays, and my plan was to remove the little front pieces and then put them back on later, but it made such a mess taking them off, so I abandoned that and only used one. Next, I picked up this music scrapbook paper at Michael's. I know Hobby Lobby sells this too, and then Mod Podged it onto the door. To know where I need to cut the paper, I put it on top of the door and then ran my finger along the edge. That adds a crease to the paper, and then I just use my paper cutter to cut it down to size. I put the Mod Podge on pretty sloppily. I wanted to distress it and make it look like areas of the paper have worn off over the years. Then I took my X-Acto knife and ran it along the slits in the door and let that Mod Podge dry. Once it's dry, I'm taking this finger sander that I have, and you can find this at Walmart, with an 80 grit sandpaper to knock off any of that excess paper I don't want. This little sander is perfect for getting into all those small grooves. Then I put a clear coat on top to stop it from distressing any further. To embellish the door, I want to add a wreath, and I had these mini grapevine wreaths from Hobby Lobby as the base and these frosted eucalyptus picks. I just cut them apart and hot glued them onto the wreath, all facing in the same direction. Next, I took this pitberry garland and twisted some pieces around a paintbrush to curl it and added those to the wreath as well. I got these berries from Hobby Lobby, and I know they're more expensive than the Dollar Tree ones, but you get a lot more and the quality is just so much better than Dollar Tree. You can see on the white Dollar Tree ones here, the berry pieces are practically falling off of the vine, where the Hobby Lobby and even Walmart ones that I have are much more secure and high-end looking. But I cut the top pieces of the vine down so it was not longer than the berries at the tip for each piece, and then put a dab of hot glue on the vine to attach the berries to it. That way it helps make it look even more high-end. Then to attach the wreaths to the door, I grabbed this velvet ribbon from my stash. It's too wide, so I cut it in half, and I also cut those wired edges off, but hold on to the edges.
I glued the two half ribbon pieces together and then added the edges back on to cover that cut edge and make it look finished. Then I glued one end of the ribbon to the wreath and the other end over the top of the door. That's it for this one. I love how it turned out.